And Keith Ellison of Minnesota. Congressman, I find myself, all of us, I think, in a little bit of a Groundhog's Day situation. It seems that once again we find ourselves in a somewhat similar situation after yet another incident like this. What is your response? Do you feel like the conversation happening in Washington, D.C. among your colleagues is responsive in any sort of affirmative policy direction?
Well, I can tell you that people, I'm outraged, but sadly we've seen this so many times. It's clearly the criminal justice system, just seems to mete out its harshest consequences to African Americans. But yeah, colleagues, we're discussing this. Members of Black Caucus were talking about it pretty extensively today, and other members as well. And we have set up a bipartisan task force on policing, which has Republican and Democratic members. We have a meeting tomorrow. We were in Detroit about a few weeks ago. So there is attention on this problem, but it just seems like it's one of those problems that just never ends. And, you feel really vulnerable, Chris, because as you look at these two incidents, you just feel like, how do these guys have this coming? Given all the facts. And, of course, we want to learn what the facts are. Investigation should continue. But again, disturbing situation.
I want to ask you about something that Donald Trump has been, according to his campaign, making an outreach to African-American voters, according to other observers, not really making an outreach, but sort of performing an outreach. He keeps talking about the depths of how terrible life is for Black Americans, and I want you to take a listen to what he said yesterday on that topic.
Right.
We're going to rebuild our inner cities because our African-American communities are absolutely in the worst shape that they've ever been in before, ever, ever, ever. You take a look at the inner cities, you get no education, you get no jobs, you get shot walking down the street.
What's your response to that?
Well, he's just perpetuating an ugly racist stereotype, to tell you the truth. And I don't believe he's talking to African Americans when he says those things. I think he's trying to fake concern to people who are responsible Republicans who want to support their party, but who are not comfortable with him. I mean, look, I wish he would actually come visit people in the African American community. He'd see a lot of success. And when he says no, worse than ever, ever, ever 3 times, America was a slaveholding nation for 246 years, and it was a second-class citizenship, Jim Crow nation for 100 years after that. We've only had about 50, 60 years of any other kind of system relative to African Americans. So you can't tell my mother this is the worst ever because she lived in Jim Crow South. You can't tell my father that because he lived in the North that didn't have signs, but they sure told you where you could and could not go. And so it just shows he doesn't know any history, doesn't know the country very well, and clearly he's not in touch with African Americans.
Congressman, you've been very outspoken about refugees, about the need to welcome them. You've been quite involved in policy on the Middle East and Syria particularly. Donald Trump said something today about why we shouldn't let refugees in that I thought was revealing. He's talked about safety, but he talked about something else today I'd like you to take a listen to. Take a listen.
Sure.
This isn't only a matter of terrorism, but also a matter of quality of life. We want to make sure that we're only admitting those into our country who support our values and love, and I mean love, our people.
What do you think he means by quality of life?
Well, I think that he wants to keep a certain kind of lifestyle for the people who he has been pointing his campaign towards. I mean, everything he's done has been overt and dog-whistled sort of, nativism, racism. And, when he says love our values, look, the United States, the only value you have to have in common with all other Americans is to defend and support the Constitution. You can come from different religious background, you can come from different political ideas, you can have all kind of views and be welcome in the United States. I mean, the criteria is the Constitution and your support of it, which is something he doesn't support very much. I mean, he's openly undermining the Equal Protection Clause. He's calling for stop and frisk, which I think undermines due process. I mean, again, I think he's dog whistling xenophobia, nativism, racism. But he's been doing that for a year, and it doesn't seem to hurt him, sadly. He's competitive in the polls, and it continues to shock me every day.
All right, Congressman.